She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just clutched the dog's fur and stared at the soldier like she was waiting for something. But the dog didn't move either, not until he saw the soldier's eyes. And that's when everything changed. The blizzard had blown through hard the night before, leaving behind a fractured trail of fallen branches, scattered gear, and the bitter hush that always follows a storm. Sergeant Luke Banner trudged through the snow, boots crunching underfoot, eyes squinting against the glare. The call had come in just before dawn, distress signal from an unregistered channel, followed by silence. No coordinates. No name. Just a looping ping from the forest's edge. He wasn't alone. Rex, his canine partner, padded silently at his side, nose twitching with purpose. They'd worked together for 4 years, cleared landmines, searched for survivors, tracked fugitives. Rex never missed a signal. Never ignored an instinct. But this time, he had stopped cold at the edge of the clearing. Luke followed his line of sight. That's when he saw her. A little girl. Maybe 6 or 7 years old. Sitting cross-legged in the snow. Wearing nothing but a torn sweater and mismatched boots. Her cheeks were raw, eyes wide, but dry. She held tightly to the neck of a massive German shepherd. Not Rex. A different dog. Older. Muzzle frosted with age. And utterly motionless. The girl didn't move. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. She just stared. Luke approached slowly, hand out, voice calm. "Hey there. You hurt?" No response. Her eyes flicked to Rex, then back to Luke. That's when the older dog stood. Not in panic. Not aggression. Just a slow, deliberate rise, shoulders squared, head high. Like a soldier standing for inspection. Rex stopped too. Something in his posture changed. Not alert. Not threatened. Recognizing. The two dogs stood like statues facing one another. Luke stepped closer. "I'm here to help. Where's your family?" Still no answer. But she didn't look afraid. She looked like she was waiting. "Okay," Luke muttered, radioing back. "Got one juvenile, female, conscious. No visible injuries. Accompanied by a large canine. Sending coordinates now." Static crackled. "Copy that. ETA on evac, 20 minutes. The girl still hadn't spoken. Luke knelt in front of her, lowering himself to her eye level. "What's your name?" She blinked slowly. Then reached into her pocket. Her hand trembled as she pulled something out, a folded, dirt-smeared piece of paper. She handed it to him. He unfolded it carefully. It was a sketch. A child's drawing. A forest. A small house. 2 people, stick figures, standing beside 2 dogs. One figure had a red X over it. The other was circled in green. A tiny blue scribble above the house looked like smoke. Luke swallowed hard. "Is this where you came from?" She nodded, barely. "Is someone else there?" She looked at him for the first time, really looked. And slowly pointed to the figure with the red X. Luke felt the wind shift. Rex whimpered. The older dog looked down. Something about this was wrong. Not just sad, off. The silence wasn't just shock. It was deliberate. The girl stood up and tugged the dog's fur gently. He followed her as she turned and began walking into the trees. Rex followed. Luke hesitated. "Wait, where are you going?" She didn't answer. But she didn't have to. The older dog turned back and looked straight at Luke. It wasn't a look of fear. It was a look of recognition. Luke had seen it before. Years ago. In a compound deep in the mountains. A mission gone sideways. A building set on fire to cover the tracks. A family that never made it out. Except for one dog. A dog they never recovered. A report he never forgot. And now, standing in front of him, that dog had just come home. Open. Luke didn't waste time calling it in again. He kept his radio silent and followed the girl as she walked deeper into the trees. Her pace wasn't hurried, but steady, like she knew exactly where she was going. The older dog stayed close beside her, moving like a shadow. Rex trailed silently behind, ears perked but posture cautious. The sun broke through the trees in long fingers of light, but the cold still bit at Luke's skin. He adjusted the strap on his rifle, alert now, fully aware this was more than just a child lost in the woods. About 100 yards in, the girl stopped. She stood at the edge of a shallow ravine, where the snow had melted slightly to reveal the blackened remains of what used to be a cabin. Charred timbers jutted from the ground like skeletal fingers. The air still smelled faintly of ash. Luke scanned the area, no recent tracks, no movement. The girl took the drawing from his hand, unfolded it again, and pointed to the red X. Then she knelt and touched the ground. Rex whined. The older dog sat beside her, his eyes locked on the blackened rubble. Luke stepped forward cautiously. Someone didn't make it out? She didn't respond. Instead, she took a stick and began to draw in the snow beside the ashes, crude shapes, circles, triangles, arrows pointing down. A trap door. Luke crouched and brushed aside snow and soot where she indicated. The soil gave way beneath his hand. Wooden slats, burnt, brittle, but still partially intact. He used his multi-tool to pry open the boards. Beneath was a crawlspace. And inside, a body. Adult. Male. Burned beyond recognition but curled protectively around something. No, someone. Luke froze. There were bones. Small. Child-sized. He looked back at the girl, whose eyes were wide but not wet. The older dog moved closer, placed his head against the exposed boards, and let out a single low whine. Luke lowered his voice. That was your brother, wasn't it? She didn't blink. But she took the red crayon from her pocket, leaned forward, and marked a single line across the stick figure with the X. Confirmed. Luke radioed in coordinates and requested an immediate forensics unit. When they asked for details, he simply said, "We've got a recovery. Human remains. Potentially multiple. No threat on site. Stand by for ID confirmation." Rex barked once, sharp and fast. Luke turned. The older dog had moved off toward a cluster of rocks. Rex followed. The girl didn't move. She stayed by the burned house, staring into the ruin. Luke gave it 30 seconds, then followed the dogs. The rocks weren't just rocks. They were stacked deliberately, a cairn. Rex sniffed and let out a sound halfway between a growl and a cry. Luke knelt and began pulling stones away. Underneath, a box. Wood. Locked with an old latch. He popped it open. Inside, documents. Photos. IDs. And a USB drive taped to the lid. He pulled out a picture, 2 adults standing with 2 kids and the 2 dogs. All smiling. Luke turned the photo over. The date was from 2 years ago. Scribbled in pencil. "If they find this, tell them we tried." Rex sat back, as if knowing the job was done. Luke looked at the older dog, who hadn't moved an inch. The frost around his muzzle caught the sunlight. He wasn't just a companion. He was a witness. To everything. Luke turned to the girl again. "What happened here?" She didn't answer. But then she did something else. She picked up the crayon again and drew a new figure, bigger than the others. Standing outside the house. And this one had no face. Only eyes. Watching. Luke held the child's new drawing with a trembling hand. The faceless figure was chilling, an ominous presence, standing outside the house, eyes drawn large and hollow. It wasn't part of the original sketch. This was something new. Something she hadn't shown before. The older dog remained completely still, as if waiting for Luke to process what he'd just seen. "Was he watching you?" Luke asked quietly, eyes scanning the forest beyond the clearing. The girl said nothing, but she walked to the charred edge of the cabin and pointed into the trees. Her finger didn't shake. Rex growled low in his throat. Luke followed the line of her finger, then unshouldered his rifle and stepped ahead, cautious, scanning the woods. The snow was thicker here. Branches hung heavy with ice. But tucked between two boulders was something man-made, a trail camera, barely visible, its lens reflecting the light like a second set of eyes. He reached it and examined the mount. Fresh tracks. Not from the girl. These were adult-sized boots. Heavy tread. Recent. The camera was still warm to the touch. He turned back. Somebody's been here. The girl didn't look surprised. Luke returned to the cairn and retrieved the box again. He opened it carefully and took out the USB drive, pocketing it. Then he turned to the girl. "We need to go." But she stood still. So did the older dog. Luke crouched in front of her. "I know you're scared. I know there's more. But I can't protect you here. I need to get you out." She finally moved, only to hand him a folded corner of a different paper from inside her sweater. It was another drawing. A tunnel. And deep inside it, the same faceless figure. Bigger now. Surrounded by tiny red XS. Luke's stomach turned. This wasn't just a home invasion or an isolated incident. There was something deeper, systematic, happening here. "Rex," he barked, motioning toward the girl. "Guard." Rex moved to her side instantly, standing protectively between her and the woods. Luke turned and jogged back up toward the ridge, scanning for more signs, trail markers, scent traces, anything. He didn't make it far. Behind him, Rex let out a sound he'd only ever made once before. Not a bark. Not a growl. A scream. Luke spun around and raced back down the slope. The girl was gone. Rex stood at the edge of the tree line, pacing furiously, sniffing the ground, barking in rapid, clipped bursts. The older dog was gone too. Luke dropped to the ground. "Where?" "Show me." Rex darted to the left, toward a narrow gap in the trees barely wide enough for a child. Luke followed. They ran. Branches clawed at his face. Snow sprayed into his boots. But they kept going, Rex pausing only long enough to confirm the trail, then sprinting again. Half a mile in, they hit a clearing. A truck. Running. Camouflaged under netting and brush, engine purring low. No plates. Luke raised his rifle. "Out. Hands where I can see them." Nothing. He moved closer. The driver's seat was empty. But on the floor, another drawing. This one was newer. Freshly creased. Unfolded. It showed the same faceless figure. Only now, he wasn't standing. He was kneeling. Beside the girl. And the red XS were gone. Only green circles remained. Rex barked once, then turned his head sharply to the north, whining. Luke's heart pounded. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started. Luke stood by the truck, his breath steaming in the cold air, his rifle still raised. But no one emerged. No sound except the low hum of the engine and the soft crunch of Rex's pacing footsteps in the snow. He yanked open the door. Empty. No driver. No keys in the ignition. No sign of a forced start. "Remote trigger," he muttered, eyes narrowing. Someone had started this vehicle from afar, or was close enough to do it without being seen. He checked the back seat. Blankets. A thermos. A bag of dog treats. a shock collar remote. And next to it, a leash with a familiar name tag, Shadow. The older dog's name. Rex whined beside him. Luke took a sharp breath. They had taken the girl. But not by force, she'd gone willingly. Or at least silently. That meant she trusted whoever it was. Or feared what would happen if she didn't. He grabbed the drawing left on the floor and studied it again. The kneeling faceless figure. The green circles. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a message. But from whom? He keyed his radio. Control, this is Banner. Do you copy? Crackling static. Then, go ahead. Tracking ongoing. Subject has moved from original location. Evidence of prior surveillance and recent presence. Unidentified vehicle located. Sending GPS coordinates now. Copy that. Support inbound ETA 10 minutes. Are subjects secure? Luke hesitated. One child missing. Possibly with known canine. Proceeding with search. Affirmative. Proceed with caution. Luke clicked off the radio. He looked at Rex, then held up the tag. Shadow. Rex sniffed it, then turned and started running, not full sprint, but steady. Focused. Determined. Luke followed. The forest thickened again, the terrain dipping into a shallow valley lined with frost-covered pines. The air felt heavier, the light dimmer. A place where echoes didn't return. They found tracks, tiny footprints and paw prints. Leading to an old hunting shack covered in moss and snow. Almost invisible. Luke raised his weapon and approached the side, flattening against the wall. Rex growled low but stayed behind. He peeked through the cracked wooden shutter. Inside, the girl. Sitting on a crate. Shadow beside her. Facing her, finally visible, was a man. Middle-aged. Weathered face. Wearing civilian clothes, but with a military posture. Kneeling, just like in a drawing. He held nothing in his hands. No weapon. No visible threat. But the girl trembled. Luke didn't hesitate. He kicked the door in, rifle up. Step back. Hands where I can see them. The man didn't flinch. He looked up slowly, and then, raised both hands. You don't understand, he said calmly. She came back to me. Luke moved to the girl, shielding her. On your knees. Face down. The man obeyed. She's not in danger. She remembered. She remembered everything. Luke called it in, gave his location, and secured the room. The girl stood, silent, looking between both men. Then she walked to the man, and took his hand. Rex barked, confused. Luke lowered his rifle slightly. Who is he? The girl didn't speak. But the man did. I was one of the handlers. Years ago. Her father trusted me. Trusted us. Luke's voice sharpened. What happened at the cabin? The man closed his eyes. An ambush. The others didn't make it. The mother died shielding the kids. The father disappeared. We thought the girl didn't remember. But she did. She just couldn't say it. Rex whined. Shadow lay down, tail thumping once. Luke stared at the man. Why didn't you report it? I tried. But no one wanted the truth. So I waited. And she came back. The girl nodded. And finally, whispered one word. Safe. The word safe echoed in the cold air like a signal flare. Luke had spent his career chasing answers through fire and fog, but never had one word broken him open the way that single whisper did. Rex moved to Ellie. Yes, her name was Ellie, he remembered now, and nudged her leg gently. She blinked and knelt beside him, placing her small hand on his back. Shadow stayed close too, positioned protectively by the door as if standing guard even in peace. Luke kept his rifle lowered, but he didn't holster it. "Start talking," he said to the man. "From the beginning." The man, his name was Barrett, nodded. 7 years ago, I was assigned to a remote operations compound. Officially, it was classified as a military training site. In reality, it was something else. He paused, glancing at Ellie. Her father was in deep operations most people never hear about. Target extraction, black site rescues, things the higher-ups wanted off the books. Luke felt a tightness in his jaw. He'd heard the rumors. He'd just never expected to be face-to-face with one of those shadows. "Go on." Barrett exhaled. The girl and her brother were brought to the site when things got hot. Their mother came later. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until they could relocate. But then there was a breach. Luke frowned. "The fire?" Barrett nodded. "An attack. Not from outside. It was an internal leak. Someone sold coordinates. They wanted the father. Didn't care who got in the way." He looked down at his hands. "We got some of them out. The mother didn't make it. The boy didn't either." Ellie didn't flinch, but Luke saw her shoulders tighten. "Rex was there," Barrett added. "And Shadow. They were trained for recovery, not combat. But when the shooting started, those two held the line. Long enough for me to get her out." Luke's voice was low. "Then why disappear? Why leave her?" "I didn't mean to. We got separated. I was injured, woke up in a hospital with no records, no contacts. By the time I recovered, they said she was dead. That everyone was accounted for." His hands trembled now. "I didn't believe them. I went off-grid. Started watching. Looking. The drawings helped. I recognized her work even when no one else did." Luke felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. "You're telling me this child found her way back to you through sketches?" Barrett nodded. "Trauma leaves fingerprints. Hers were in the lines. The colors. The silence." Ellie reached into her pocket and handed Luke one last drawing. This one different. It showed a figure, Barrett, kneeling beside her. And beside them, the two dogs. Behind them, a tree. A huge tree with hundreds of papers hanging from its branches. Luke studied it carefully. "What's this?" Ellie looked up and, for the second time, spoke. "Truth Tree." Barrett smiled faintly. "It's what she called it. A place to leave your truths. Somewhere safe." Luke nodded slowly. "We'll get you both out." And then, we talked to command. Outside, the wind began to pick up. Snow whipped against the shack. But inside, for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt whole. The evac team arrived just after dusk. 2 black trucks. No insignia. No questions. Just hands ready to lift Ellie into warmth and security. She didn't resist. Shadow followed close, leaping into the back without hesitation. Rex remained by Luke's side, glancing back as the convoy started rolling. Barrett wasn't in cuffs, but he was surrounded. Luke insisted on it, not as punishment, but protection. Command still had to decide what to do with a man who'd vanished with this much knowledge and returned with more. As the vehicles pushed west through the snow, Luke sat beside Ellie in the back seat. She had her sketchbook open on her lap. Crayons in hand. "Already working." "What are you drawing now?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Just kept shading a thick tree trunk with browns and grays. Branches reached upward, heavy with dangling pages, miniature drawings fluttering from each limb. He recognized it instantly. The truth tree. She nodded once. He smiled. Where is it? She looked out the window. Not here yet. But the words stayed with him. Not here yet. Meaning it would be. Somewhere. Luke spent the next 48 hours in debriefings. Analysts, commanders, therapists. Everyone wanted the same thing, the timeline. The trauma. The threat assessment. He gave them what he could. But when they asked about Ellie's drawings, the faces, the tunnels, the faceless man, he stayed quiet. It wasn't his story to give. Barrett's information cracked open sealed files. Names redacted were suddenly visible. Coordinated operations were reviewed. Quiet arrests were made. No press releases. No noise. Ellie's mother's name was finally cleared of the desertion charge. Her brother's death was confirmed through DNA. Her father's last known location was verified, and a small team was sent to recover what remained of the original compound. When they returned, they brought back a wooden crate. Inside, scorched remnants of family photos, a broken compass, and a collar tag for a K9 registered under a false name, Rex. Luke stared at it for a long time. You were already part of this, he whispered to his dog. Rex rested his head on Luke's boot in reply. Later that week, Ellie made a decision. She wanted to speak. Not to a court. Not to command. To kids. She sat in front of a room filled with children from all over the system, silent ones, angry ones, ones who only communicated through colors and shapes. She didn't give them instructions. She just handed out paper. And when they looked unsure, she drew first. The tree. The pages. The dogs. The soldier who listened. The one who didn't ask her to scream, but simply waited. By the end of the hour, every child had drawn something. Even those who hadn't held a pencil in months. The project spread like wildfire. Centers across the country adopted the Truth Tree method, an art-first trauma program led by Silent Resilience and Canine Support. Ellie's original tree was recreated in metal and wood, a sculpture in the courtyard of the new recovery center. At its base, etched in brass. The dog didn't move. The girl didn't speak. But the soldier listened, and so the world changed. Ellie never liked microphones. She didn't need them. Her drawings had become her language, and her voice, when she used it, was reserved for moments that mattered. So when she was asked to speak at the opening of the Truth Tree Memorial Garden, she agreed on one condition. No stage. No podium. Just her. A table. Paper. And a blank wall where anyone's drawing could be pinned. The day was crisp. Spring had just arrived, and children from across the country came wearing coats dotted with patches from their local centers, each patch stitched with a tiny tree and 2 dogs beneath it. Luke arrived early. Rex walked beside him, fur graying now but spirit still sharp. Shadow came too, his posture more relaxed than ever, like retirement had finally softened him. Barrett remained a quieter figure these days. He volunteered behind the scenes, training K9s and reviewing recovery strategies. Never front-facing. Never photographed. That was Ellie's request. He's done enough, she once said. He saved me twice. At the garden, Ellie knelt on the grass and helped a small boy press his crayon into a drawing. He had refused to speak for almost 2 years. Today, he drew a door, and then added a doorknob. That's new, his counselor whispered. Ellie just nodded and smiled. One by one, kids came forward to hang their artwork on the large oak board beside the sculpture. The Truth Tree itself, a towering steel and wood creation, stood in the center, its branches filled with wind chimes made from old dog tags and drawing clips. Each breeze sang like memory. When Ellie was done helping, she stepped forward, folded her own drawing in half, and pinned it without showing anyone. The chimes quieted. Everyone waited. She turned and looked at the crowd, children, counselors, officers, soldiers, even some of the agents who once didn't believe her. She said only this: "You don't need to speak to be heard." Then she sat down again. That night, Luke walked the garden alone. Snow had started to fall again, soft flakes dusting the sculptures and benches. Rex stayed close, pausing now and then to sniff new scents. At the base of the tree, Luke saw Ellie's folded drawing. It had fallen, fluttering onto the stone path. He picked it up. Opened it. Inside, a new version of her original sketch. The house was gone. The faceless figure had no eyes now, just a trail leading away from it. The girl stood beside two dogs and a man in uniform. But this time, they weren't under attack. There were no red XS. Just a wide field behind them, stretching into the horizon. Above it all, in careful handwriting: "We never needed to be loud. We just needed someone to listen." Luke folded the drawing and slid it into his coat pocket. Then he looked at Rex. "Come on, buddy. Still more work to do." Rex barked softly, then followed. The next phase of Ellie's journey wasn't marked by speeches or applause. It came quietly, through stories written in chalk on sidewalks and crayon scribbles in counseling centers across the country. But something else began to shift too. More children, previously deemed nonverbal, began to communicate, sometimes through art, sometimes through gestures, and often through the presence of a dog. The K-9 program exploded with new funding, new trainers, and a renewed understanding that trauma didn't need to be explained. It just needed to be witnessed. Luke found himself pulled into the new program. Not as a soldier, but as an advocate. He and Rex traveled together, visiting shelters, clinics, and temporary homes. Wherever they went, Ellie's name preceded them, not as a celebrity, but as a symbol. And then, one spring morning, Luke received a letter. No return address. Just a hand-drawn tree on the envelope. Inside was a single photo. The original drawing Ellie had given him, recreated exactly, but with one change. The faceless man was gone. In his place, a patch of sunlit ground with a wildflower growing where he once stood. Luke turned the photo over. A line was written in Ellie's blocky handwriting. Some things don't have to be erased. Just replaced with something better. That same week, Barrett passed quietly in his sleep. He was found in his modest cabin with Shadow by his side, a notepad full of training schedules on the desk, and an envelope marked Ellie clutched in his hand. Luke was asked to deliver it. Ellie opened it in silence. Inside, a single drawing from Barrett himself. Two figures, one young, one older, building a small wooden shelter together. A third figure, a dog, slept peacefully nearby. At the top, in shaky penmanship: "You were never too quiet. I was just too loud to hear you." Ellie didn't cry. She folded the paper, kissed it once, and placed it inside her sketchbook without a word. Later that day, she took Rex for a walk around the garden. He was slower now, his age finally catching up, but he still wagged his tail every time she looked at him. At the center of the walk, Ellie stopped by a bench and reached into her coat. She pulled out a new drawing. This one had no people. Just trees. Dozens of them. Each one with drawings hanging from their branches. Rex nudged the corner of the page with his nose, as if approving it. She laughed quietly, folded it again, and pinned it to the bench with a thumbtack she always carried. When Luke passed by later, he noticed the new paper. And smiled. Because now, the truth tree wasn't just one place. It was everywhere. Word of Ellie's drawings and the truth tree legacy had reached places no one expected. Schools, shelters, even military hospitals began integrating the concept, not just for children, but for veterans too. Men and women who hadn't spoken of their own traumas for decades found themselves sketching memories they never dared voice. One afternoon, Luke was invited to a veterans retreat tucked in the Colorado foothills. He brought Rex, now mostly retired but still eager for purpose. Ellie didn't come this time, she had school. But she sent a package, blank notebooks, bundles of crayons, and a note. Let them write it without words. Inside the retreat's common room, the first few veterans chuckled at the idea. But when Luke sat down and began drawing next to them, quietly, without pressure, something shifted. A man named Harris, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words in 3 years, started drawing the jungle. Another, Corporal Denise, drew a radio tower surrounded by shadowed figures. Each picture, when pinned to the wall, became part of a forest. By the end of the weekend, they named it the second tree. Luke called Ellie and told her. She only said, then it worked. 1 week later, a small dog arrived at Ellie's door. He was a rescue. Unnamed. Slight limp. Big eyes. She crouched, studied him silently, then picked up her crayons. 10 minutes later, she showed Luke the drawing. The little dog sitting beneath a big tree. Above him, 3 words, still listening. Always. She named him Echo. Shadow had passed the season before, quiet and peaceful, curled in a sunbeam as if he were always meant to disappear gently. Luke buried him beneath the original truth tree and pinned his leash to the base. It didn't take long for the spot to become a place of quiet visits, especially for kids who had recently lost someone. They called it Shadow's Watch. Rex, older now, stayed home more. His pace had slowed, but he still rose every morning when Ellie opened her sketchbook, as if sensing something new would be shared that day. Then one morning, he didn't. Ellie found him lying beside her bed, head resting against her drawing pad, one paw touching her pencil box. She didn't cry. She just stroked his fur, wrapped his collar in one of her drawings, and waited for Luke to arrive. They buried him beside Shadow. 2 tags now swung gently from the tree's lowest branch. Rex and Shadow. The guardians of truth. And Echo? He stayed by Ellie's side, always tilting his head whenever she drew, as if understanding every line before she finished it. Years passed. The truth tree became more than a sculpture, more than a method, it became a movement. Children and adults alike used it as a way to speak without sound. Hospitals, shelters, and even disaster response teams used versions of it to begin healing where words failed. Ellie grew. So did Echo. He became her companion, her coworker, and sometimes her only listener when memories got too loud. Luke retired from fieldwork and became a full-time coordinator for trauma recovery centers. His files weren't filled with data sheets anymore, they were filled with drawings. Some heartbreaking, some healing. But all honest. On what would have been Rex's 15th birthday, Ellie hosted a gathering at the original Truth Tree. It wasn't a ceremony. Just a quiet invitation. No speeches. No music. Just paper. Crayons. And silence. Kids sat in the grass, heads bent over drawings. Adults paced slowly through the trees, reading the pinned papers left by others. Luke found Ellie beneath the tree, pinning up a new piece. He asked, "Is this one for Rex?" She nodded. Then pointed. In her drawing, a large field of trees. And under each one, a figure. Some tall. Some small. Some with dogs. Some alone. But every figure was looking up, at the pages fluttering above them. "Everyone has a tree now," she said softly. Luke crouched beside her. "They do. Because of you." She looked at him. "Because of Rex. And Shadow. And you." He smiled. We were just the first ones to listen. The wind picked up. The tree branches swayed, dog tags clinking together like a chorus of memory. Echo barked once, then laid his head in Ellie's lap. She looked down at him. And for the first time in years, she whispered a full sentence. You can rest now. I know how to speak. Luke didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Later that night, when the crowd had gone and the sun dipped behind the trees, Ellie stayed back. She walked the path alone, stopping at each of the now 5 trees planted in the grove. Each tree had its own purpose. One for grief. One for healing. One for hope. One for stories. And the last, just planted, was for beginnings. She pinned her final drawing of the night on that tree. It showed a small girl holding a leash. Behind her, shadows. In front of her, light. Beside her, 2 dogs, one gray, one golden. And ahead, a blank field. With nothing drawn on it yet. A title scrawled at the bottom. My turn to listen. Ellie folded her hands in front of her chest and stepped back. No applause. No cameras. Just wind, trees, and the quiet breath of a world still learning how to listen.